The war had lasted longer than I had been alive, and I ended it with a stroke of ink that took less time than a heartbeat. I remember the quill more than the words. It was a poor thing, its feathers stripped ragged by some clerk's nervous fingers, and when I set its tip to the treaty, the point dragged and spat a blot beside my name. 40 years of dead men, of burned steadings along the border woods, of my father coughing out his last winter with the war still unfinished in his mouth, and it was closed by a blotted signature and a bad quill in a cold room. Across the table, the Briar Alpha Maddox signed his own name with a hand that did not shake, though he was old and had buried more sons to Ostmark than I had cousins. He did not look at me when it was done. He looked at the door. "She is coming," he said. "You will treat her well or there is no peace at all." I did not answer him because I did not yet know what my answer was worth. A treaty is only paper until the Pax decide to believe it. And the thing we had agreed to, the thing that would make my counselors believe and his warriors lower their spears, was not the ink. It was her. I was to wed the Briar Alpha's daughter. Ostmark and Briarlyn joined in one hall, one hearth, one bloodline going forward, so that no wolf on either side of the woods could raise a spear again without cutting his own kin. It was a sound plan. It was the plan of tired men who have run out of sons to spend. I had agreed to it the way you agree to have a wound sewn shut, because the bleeding is worse than the needle. I had not expected to feel anything about the woman herself. I had made peace with that too. I was 31 years a king and had never taken a mate. My wolf had gone quiet inside me the year my father died, and in the long grinding seasons of the war it had not woken. It only watched. It watched the border, watched my counselors' hands, watched the shadows in my own hall, and it never once rested, and it never once reached toward anything. I had come to think of it as a sentry that had forgotten how to be a wolf. I did not expect a stranger's daughter to change that. I expected to stand beside her, speak the right, and be alone in a marriage the way I had learned to be alone in everything. Then the door opened, and she came in out of the gray afternoon, and my wolf lifted its head. I want to be plain about this because I have heard other kings speak of the bond as a striking, a seizing, a fire in the blood. It was not that for me. It was quieter and it undid me more. For 11 years the wolf in me had done nothing but watch, alert and cold and tireless. When she stepped over my threshold, it stopped watching and it began to listen, the way you turn your head in a house you thought empty at the sound of someone breathing in the next room. A listening. As though somewhere far off a voice I had waited my whole life to hear had finally started to speak, too soft yet to make out the words, and everything in me went still to catch it. I had rehearsed a cold courtesy. I had none. She was not what the songs about enemy brides had prepared me for. She was neither cowed nor haughty. She wore a traveling gown of river gray, plain against the hard finery of my court, and she had the composure of someone who has decided, on the long road, exactly how much of herself she will let a hostile room take. Her eyes went once around my hall, the banners, the spears racked along the walls, the counselors ranged like a jury, and I watched her read every one of them in the space of a breath, and decide none of them frightened her. Then her eyes came to me and stopped. "Alpha King," she said, her voice was low and even. "I am Aloin of Briarlyn. My father sends me to keep his word." "You are welcome in Ostmark," I said, and the lie of it, for she was not welcome, not to the men behind me, sat between us where we both could see it. She saw it, her mouth moved, not quite a smile. "I am welcome to you, perhaps," she said. "That will do for now." Behind me, my uncle Osric made a sound in his throat. Osric had been my father's war marshal and was now mine, a broad gray wolf of a man who had spent his life in the border woods and had never once, in all our councils, spoken the word peace without letting it curdle in his mouth. "The Briar woman speaks freely for a hostage," he said. "She is not a hostage," I said. "She is my bride. You will address her as your Luna or you will not address her at all." It was the first time I had claimed the word aloud, and I felt it change the room. Aloin's eyes flicked to me, surprised, I thought. that I had spent even that much steel on her so soon in front of my own. I did not know yet why I had. I told myself it was policy. A king who lets his court insult his bride on her first hour has already broken the treaty in the only place a treaty can be broken, which is in the believing of it. But it was not policy, it was the listening. I had turned my head toward the sound of her, and I could not turn it back. We were wed that same evening, because to wait was to give the doubters on both sides a night to work. The rite in Ostmark is old and stern, no flowers, no song, only the two of us before the pack under the iron chandelier, my hand over hers on the blade-worn oak of the pledge stone, the words that bind. Her hand was cold. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I wanted to warm it, and that I had no right, and that I was a fool of a king to be thinking of a cold hand, when half the men in the room were measuring the distance between her and a knife. When it was done, when the pack had given the low, reluctant assent that is all a truce can buy in a night, I took her from the hall myself, before Osric or any other could take the last word. I brought her to the Queen's chambers, which had stood empty my whole reign, aired now and warmed and made fine. And at the door I did a thing I had decided upon on the long gray afternoon while I waited for a stranger, and had not changed my mind about even now that the stranger had turned my wolf inside out. "These are your rooms," I said. "The door bolts from within. No one enters them without your leave, not my counselors, not my guards, not I. There is a second chamber through that arch for me, when the court must believe we share a hearth. But you will not be troubled. This marriage is a treaty. I will not ask of you anything a treaty cannot ask. You are safe here." She stood very still. For the first time since she had crossed my threshold, something in her composure moved not fear, but the surprise of someone braced for a blow that does not fall. "They told me you were cold," she said at last. "I am," I said. "No," she said slowly, studying me the way she had studied my hall. "You are guarded. That is a different thing. A cold man would not have troubled to make a stranger safe." And then, quietly, as though it cost her something, "Thank you, Alpha King." "Aldrich," I said, "I do not know why. My name is Aldrich." "Then thank you, Aldrich," she said, and she stepped inside, and the door closed, and I stood alone in the corridor with the whole listening length of me still turned toward the sound of her breathing on the other side of the oak, and I understood that I was in more danger than the whole of Briarlyn had ever put me in, and that the danger was entirely of my own making. I had thought the hard part was done. I had thought the war was the war, and the peace was a signature and a wedding, and what came after would be the slow, dull labor of two packs learning not to reach for their spears. I was a soldier's son, and I understood the ending of wars. I did not understand what I now know, which is that a war does not end for the men who grew fat on it, and there were men in my own hall who had grown very fat indeed. But that autumn I did not see them yet. That autumn I was learning my wife. I learned her the way you learn a language you were never taught, by living inside it. I learned that she woke before the court and walked the walls at dawn, and that the guards, who had been ordered to watch her and had expected to hate the task, began within a fortnight to save her the driest bread and the warmest corner of the gatehouse, because she asked them their names and remembered their children's. I learned that she read a room the way my best scouts read a tree line, not the loud things but the small ones, the counselor who would not meet the Briar envoy's eyes, the steward whose ledger did not match his manner. I learned that she was braver than her gentleness let on, and gentler than her courage let show, and that both were real, and that I had spent 11 years believing such a thing was not possible in one person. I learned it chiefly from the wolf. We keep a kennel below the east tower, the working wolves of the hold, and among them that autumn was a black bitch we called Vesh, half wild, taken from a border den after her pack was scattered in the last raids of the war. She had killed a man's hand nearly through before we caged her, and no one in Ostmark could go near her. My master of hounds wanted her put down. I had not given the order, because There was something in the way she watched the door that I recognized, and I did not care to kill a thing for the crime of having only learned to watch. I found Aloan in the kennel one gray morning 3 weeks after the wedding. She was sitting on the straw outside Vesh's cage, not reaching in, not speaking, only sitting, with a bruise coming up along her wrist where the bitch had caught her the first time she tried. She had, I would learn, come every morning since. And that morning Vesh was lying with her great scarred head against the bars, as close to Aloan's cold hand as the iron would let her come, and she was asleep. "No one goes near that animal," I said from the doorway, and Aloan did not startle, only looked up. "No one had gone near her without meaning to master her," she said. "She isn't cruel. She's only never been left alone long enough to stop expecting the whip." She looked back at the sleeping wolf. "I know the feeling." I came and sat down on the straw beside her, a king in the dirt of his own kennel, and Vesh opened one eye and looked at me and did not so much as growl, because my scent was on the woman and the woman was safe, and to that half-wild ruin of a wolf that made me safe as well. And I felt the listening in my own chest turn toward Aloan so sharply that I had to look away, at the bitch, at the straw, at anything, so that she would not see my face. "You'll have the whole kennel loving you by winter," I said to say something. "I would rather have the king," she said, and then, hearing herself, went still. "For the peace," she added quickly. "I meant a wife the king does not care for is a treaty the Pax will not trust. It is only sense." "It is only sense," I agreed, and neither of us believed a word of it, and Vesh sighed in her sleep between us like a chaperone giving up. It was that same week I first understood that someone did not want the sense of it at all. We were at the high table, a lean supper, the court thin because half my lords were still at their own holds licking the war's wounds. Aloan sat at my right, where Aluna sits, and I saw her go quiet in a particular way. She had not the quiet of shyness, but the quiet of a scout who has seen a track that should not be there. Her eyes were on the far end of the hall, where Osric sat among the younger warriors, laughing, one heavy arm around the shoulders of a border captain named Grell, whom I had not summoned, and did not remember granting leave to come. "You know that man," she said to me, low, not moving her lips much. "Grell, a border captain, Osric's man. He came in this afternoon by the postern, not the gate," she said, wet to the knee. "There is no ford between here and the border that a man crosses to the knee unless he is coming from the briar side of the woods." She turned her cup slowly in her fingers. "My father's warriors do not cross the woods, Aldrich. We agreed to it. So either your border captain is calling on my father's men without either of our leave, or someone here is sending him too." I looked at Grell, laughing under my uncle's arm, and I looked at Osric, and I felt the old sentry cold I had lived with for 11 years come back into my wolf all at once, layered now over the listening, so that I was both at once, a man who has just heard a beloved voice and a man who has just heard a footstep behind him in the dark. "You see a great deal for a bride," I said. "I was raised to see," she said simply. "My father had 4 sons and buried 3 of them to this war. He taught his daughter the only thing he had left to teach, how to watch a room and know which man in it is lying. It is not a gift I wanted, but I have it, and I am telling you, something in your hall is wrong, and it was wrong before I came, and my marriage has not mended it. It has only given it a shape to blame." I did not want to believe her. Osric was my father's brother. He had carried me on his shoulders through the burned steading at Velric when I was 6, and the raiders had come in the night. He had put my father's sword in my hand the day we buried the old king. He had stood at my back in every council of the war. A man does not easily believe the sentry he trusts most is the one who has been leaving the gate unbarred. But my wolf believed her before I did, and I had learned in 3 weeks to trust the listening. "Then we watch," I said, "you and I quietly. We tell no one because I do not yet know how far the wrong reaches, and a king who accuses the wrong man loses more than a war. We watch and we gather, and we are certain before we move." I looked at her. Can you do that? It is a dangerous game, and you are a stranger in a hostile hall, and if I am wrong about my own blood, we will both of us pay for it." She held my eyes. "I crossed the woods alone into my father's enemy's hall to marry a man I had never met, for the sake of a peace neither pack wanted," she said. "I did not come this far to lose it to one fat marshal's greed. Yes, Aldrich, I can watch." And so it began, the second secret marriage, the one no treaty had asked for. By day we were the cold king and his treaty bride, correct and distant, giving the court exactly what it expected. By night we were something else entirely, two people bent over a single candle in her bolted chambers, tracing the shape of a plot the way you trace a wound to find the ball still in it, where Grell went and when, whose seals appeared on which orders, which of my counselors had grown quiet, which had grown too loud. She had the eyes and I had the throne, and between us we saw what neither could have seen alone. And somewhere in those long candle-lit nights, without either of us saying it, the game we were playing to save the peace became the truest thing in my life, and I stopped being able to imagine the nights without her in them. I will tell you the night the last of it fell away, because it is the night I understood what I had, and how nearly I had been about to lose it without ever knowing I held it. It was deep in the winter by then. We had been at our secret work for 2 months, and we had learned a great deal and could prove almost none of it, which is the cruelest stretch of any hunt, the part where you know and cannot say. That night Aloan had gone down to the kennels, as she did, to sit with Vesh, and she did not come back at the hour she should have. I have said the listening was a quiet thing. It was not quiet that night. It came up in me like a struck bell, a wrongness, an absence where her breathing should have been in the shape of my thoughts, and I was out of my chamber and down the tower stairs before I had decided to move, and the sentry cold and the listening were one thing now, one animal, and its whole self was pointed at the east tower like a drawn bow. I found her in the passage below the kennel. She was on her feet, but only just, one hand braced against the stone, and there was a kitchen boy backed against the far wall with a knife in his shaking hand and tears on his face. A boy of perhaps 14 named Tam, whom I had seen 100 times carrying wood and never once looked at. Between them on the stones lay a spilled cup and a dark stain soaking into the straw. "He didn't drink it," Aloan said, hoarse. "I made certain he didn't drink it." It took me a moment to understand. The boy had not come to knife her. The boy had come to be made to poison me. The cup was mine, sent up nightly to my chamber, and this frightened child had been given the vial and the choice. And Aloan had caught him on the stair, and rather than raise the hall and see him hanged, she had talked him off the ledge of it, had made him spill the cup, had put herself between a terrified boy and the men who had bent him. And she had nearly gone over the ledge with him. The knife had come out in his panic, not his malice, and there was a thin red line along her forearm where it had caught her before she got the words into him. I do not remember crossing the passage. I remember having her by the shoulders and the red line under my hands and the whole world narrowed to it. "You are hurt," I said, and my voice did not sound like my own. "It is nothing. Aldrich, listen to me, the boy matters more than my arm. They have his mother, Osric's men. They told him the king must die tonight or they would give her to the woods. He is not our enemy, he is a lever." She gripped my wrist. "If we hang him, we lose him, and we lose the one witness who has heard Osric's men give an order aloud. If we hide him, we have proof that walks and talks." She was bleeding and shaking, and thinking 3 moves ahead of me, and thinking of the boy's mother, and I stood in that cold passage, and I felt the last wall I had kept between us for the sake of the word treaty come down all at once, not slowly, not gently, but all at once, the way a river takes a dam it has been leaning on all winter. "Tam," I said, and made my voice king again for the boy's sake, "where is your mother held?" He told me through his weeping, aboard her steading Grell's 3 days off. And I knew then that we did not have to wait for certainty any longer, because certainty had walked into my hall with a knife and a spilled cup and a mother in the woods, and all that was left was to spring the trap before Osric could. I sent Rurik, my captain, the one man in Ostmark whose loyalty I had never once had cause to doubt, with a picked handful quietly that same night, to take back the boy's mother before Osric knew his lever had slipped. And I took Aloan to her chambers, and I bolted the door myself, and I cleaned the cut on her arm with my own hands, badly, because a king's hands are not made for such work, and she let me, and neither of us spoke for a long while. When it was bound, she looked at me across the candle, and the game and the plot and the treaty were all somewhere very far off, and she said, "You should go back to your chamber. If we are careful, this changes nothing they can see." "No," I said. "Aldrich, I have called you a treaty for 3 months," I said, "because I am a coward, and because I did not think I had the right, and because I thought that if I said the true thing aloud it would put you in more danger than you were already in. All 3 of those were true, and all 3 of them were also a wall I built because I was afraid. And tonight you stood in a cold passage bleeding and thought first of a poisoner's mother, and I will not spend 1 more hour on the far side of a wall from that." I took her bound hand, the whole of me listening, the way it had listened from the first hour, and now at last I let myself hear the words. "You are not a treaty, Aloan. You never were. My wolf knew it before I did, the moment you crossed my door. I have been alone 11 years, and I did not know I was alone until you were in the room. Whatever we are to the Pax, to the ink, to my uncle, to the peace, to me you are the only thing the war ever gave me that I would not give back." I lowered my voice, because the last of it was the truest and the hardest. "I will never let you go." She was quiet a long time. Then she turned her hand in mine so that our fingers laced, cold hand and cold hand no longer. "They told me I was being sent to be endured," she said. "I made my peace with it on the road. I would be endured, and I would do my duty, and I would be lonely in a stone hall until I died, and it would be worth it if the boys stopped dying." Her eyes were bright. "I did not make my peace with this. I did not make my peace with a man who cleans a cut badly and calls his own courage cowardice and looks at me the way you are looking at me now. I don't know what to do with it, Aldrich." "It wasn't in the bargain." "Then let it not be a bargain," I said. "Let it be the one thing in either of our lives that was never bargained for." I did not press her further, because the whole of what I am would not let me press her, then or ever. I would have slept in the corridor sooner than take a thing she was not freely giving, but she did not send me to the corridor. She kept my hand, and we sat by the low fire while the winter worked at the walls, and we talked of her 3 dead brothers and my dead father, of the peace and what we would build with it if we lived to build anything at all, of the boy Tam and the wolf Vesh, and all the broken things that only wanted to stop expecting the whip. And somewhere in the small hours, the listening in me became something I can only call rest. For the first time in 11 years, the sentry laid down its head, because the thing it had been watching for all along was here, and safe, and holding my hand by a dying fire. We had 4 days before the peace feast. Osric did not know that his poisoner had failed. He did not know Rurik was riding for the boy's mother. He did not know that his enemy's daughter had spent 3 months teaching the cold king of Ostmark to hear. He thought he had one more move to make, and he thought it would win him back his war. He was about to make it in front of both packs. The peace feast had been set since the wedding, the day, at the turn of the year, when Briarlin and Ostmark would sit at one table under one roof, and let the 2 packs see with their own eyes that the war was over. Maddox came with his lords and his surviving son. My hall was fuller than it had been in a decade. Ostmark Grey and Briarlin Rivergreen ranged along the same boards, wary as 2 floods meeting, and over it all the peace hung like ice on a branch, beautiful and ready to break. I knew Osric would move here. It was the only stage wide enough for what he wanted, which was not my death. He had learned, I think, that killing me quietly would only put a boy cousin on the throne and change little. What he wanted was the peace itself, killed in front of everyone, so publicly and so bloodily that no signature could ever raise it again. and he had built his knife for it out of the one thing every wolf in that hall was already half ready to believe, that the Briar Bride was a viper sent to poison us from within. He rose when the meat was cleared, my uncle, broad and gray and grieved looking, and he asked leave to speak, and I gave it, because I wanted him to reach for the knife where I could take his wrist. Alpha King, lords of both packs. His voice filled the hall, the war marshal's voice, the one that had steadied lines of frightened men in the woods. It grieves me past speaking to break the joy of this night. But I have kept silent too long already, out of love for my king, and I will not let love make me a traitor to my pack. He let that word land, traitor, and I watched it travel down the Ostmark boards like a spark on a fuse. There is a serpent at this table, and it wears the green of Briarlyn. The hall went to stone. Maddox came half out of his seat. His son's hand went to where a knife would have been if we had let them keep knives. Beside me, I felt Aloan go very still, the scout's stillness, the one I knew now better than my own heartbeat. I have proof, Osric said, and produced it, letters, a small bundle sealed and travel-stained, and he laid them on the board, and I saw the briar seal on them, or a thing made to look like the briar seal, and my stomach turned not with fear but with a cold and terrible admiration for how well the trap was built. Letters, he said, in the Luna's own hand, carried across the woods these 3 months to her father's captains, signals, troop counts, the postern gates watch hours, where our walls are thin. He turned to me, and his grief was very good, it was nearly perfect. I who had known him all my life could almost have believed it. She was never a bride, nephew, she was a scout. And in 3 nights' time, on a signal in these very letters, the men of Briarlyn were to come through a postern she left unbarred and end Ostmark in its sleep, peace, feast, and all. He swept his arm down the hall. There is your treaty, lords. There is what their ink was worth. I say the traitor dies tonight, and the war she came to lose us begins again in the morning, and this time we finish it. And the hall roared, Ostmark gray surging up, Briarlyn green surging up to meet it. 40 years of the war all standing up at once out of its shallow grave. And it would have been done. It would truly have been done. Blood on the peace boards and the woods aflame by the new moon. If we had not spent 3 months in the dark learning the exact shape of this knife so that, when it came, we could catch it by the blade. I did not shout. A king who shouts into a roaring hall only feeds it. I stood, and I let the height of me and the silence of me do the work, and by degrees the roar broke against my stillness and fell to a low and dangerous quiet. You have made a grave accusation, uncle, I said, against your Luna at my own table before both packs. I would not be a king worth the name if I did not weigh it. I looked at the letters. May I? He gave them to me with the confidence of a man who has forged something very well, and he had. They were good. The hand was a fair copy of Aloan's, the seal was cut close, the troop counts were real, they would have to be believed. Any king in a hurry, any king who wanted to believe it, would have called for the axe. They are very good, I said aloud, so good that I must ask the hall a question. If my Luna wished to send secret letters to her father's captains across the woods, she who walks my walls in plain sight every dawn, who sits at my right hand every night, why would she seal them at all? A seal is a thing that hangs a spy. A spy sends no seal. I turned the top letter to the light. And why would she seal them with a briar seal cut * wrong? Look, lords of Briarlyn, you know your own pack's mark. Look at the thorn on the seal. Which way does the thorn curve? Maddox looked. His son looked. And the Briar Alpha's old face changed because the thorn on that seal curved the wrong way, a small thing. A thing only a briar wolf would know. A thing an Ostmark forger working from a stolen impression would get subtly, fatally wrong. That is no briar seal, Maddox said slowly, into the silence. That is a copy made by someone who has never held the true one, someone on this side of the woods. So it would seem, I said, which is a strange thing for my Luna to be carrying. She has held the true seal all her life. I set the letters down. But a forged seal only tells us the letters are false. It does not tell us who made them, for that, and here I raised my voice at last, and it carried to the doors, "Rurik, bring in what you brought home." The doors opened. My captain came up the hall, and behind him came a border woman, thin and frightened and free, Tam's mother, whom Rurik had taken back from Grell's steading 3 nights past without a drop of blood spilled, because a garrison built to guard a lever does not fight hard once the lever is gone. And behind her, walking on his own feet, small and pale and steadier than I had any right to expect, came the boy. "This is Tam," I said. "He carries my wine to my chamber each night. 3 nights ago he was given a vial of poison and a choice, kill his king, or his mother would be given to the woods. He is 14 years old. I let that travel the hall too. He did not kill me." My Luna caught him on the stair, and rather than see a bent child hanged, she talked the knife out of his hand and hid him and kept him safe. The serpent asterisk, Lords, the asterisk scout, spent the knife cut on her own arm to save a poisoner's life. I turned. "Tam, look at no one but me. Who gave you the vial?" The boy's eyes did not go to me. They could not help it. They went, wide and terrified, straight to the broad gray man standing frozen beside the forged letters, and every wolf in that hall followed the child's gaze to its end, and Osric's grief at last cracked. "His man Grell gave it," the boy whispered. "On the marshal's word. I heard him say it. The marshal wants the king dead and the briar woman blamed and the war back by spring. I heard him say it, my lord. I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry." "And Grell," I said, though I knew. "In the border steading," Rurik said, "in irons. He is very eager to name the man above him in exchange for his neck. It is the same name." The hall was silent now, with a different silence. Osric stood among the wreckage of his forgery with 100 pairs of eyes upon him, and I watched him weigh, in the old war marshal's way, whether there was any line still to hold, and find there was none. "You would take the word of a briar viper and a kitchen rat," he said, "but it came out thin, over your own blood." "I would take the word of a wrong-curved thorn," I said, "and a freed woman and a captain in irons, and a boy brave enough to weep the truth in front of 2 packs, over the word of a man who has grown rich on this war for 40 years and cannot bear to see it end." I came down from the high table, and I stood before my uncle, and I did not raise my voice, because the whole hall was listening now, and I did not need to. "You carried me out of the fire at Velric. I have not forgotten it, and I will not have you killed for it, though the law says I could. But you would have burned the peace and every child in both these packs to keep your war, and you would have hanged my Luna to do it. You are stripped of your marshalcy and your seat and your name in this hall. You will live out your years at the far northern hold alone, and you will hear every spring the sound of no war coming. That is your sentence. Take him." They took him. He did not fight. The hall watched my father's brother led down the length of it and out the doors, and I felt no triumph in it, only the old grief of a thing that had been broken so long ago I had grown up thinking it was whole. And then I turned back to the hall, both packs together, gray and green, the forged letters still lying on the board between them, and I understood that the piece had just survived the only blow that could truly have killed it, and that it had been saved not by my throne and not by my sword, but by 3 months of quiet nights, and a woman who had been sent to be endured. There was one thing left to do, and I did it not for policy, though it was good policy. I did it because I had spent 11 years unable to reach for anything, and I was done being that man. "Lords of Ostmark, Lords of Briarlin." I put out my hand, and Eloin rose and came to me, composed as she had been on the first hour she crossed my door, her bound arm at her side, and she put her cold hand in mine, and it was not cold. "You were told this woman was a treaty. You were told she was a bargain, a hostage, a serpent. You were told whatever the moment required, by me among others, for I called her a treaty myself, because I was afraid of the truth. So hear the truth now plainly, so that no forger and no marshal can ever again make you doubt it. She is not a treaty. She is my mate. My wolf knew her the moment she stood in that door, and it has not been silent since, though it was silent through the whole of the war. She caught the knife meant for me and thought first of a poisoner's mother. She saw the rot in my own hall when my own counselors could not. There is no peace here tonight that she did not save with her own hands and her own eyes and her own blood, and I will spend the rest of my reign making certain that both these packs know it. And here is the thing I did not plan, the thing that came up out of me on its own because my wolf, which had gone quiet the year my father died and had done nothing for 11 years but watch, and had begun 3 months ago only to listen, at last, in that packed and silent hall with her hand in mine, found its voice. I threw back my head and I howled the long, low, unkingly, unashamed howl of a wolf that has come home, and the sound of it broke against the iron chandelier and filled the hall to the rafters. And after a stunned moment, the wolves of Ostmark took it up, gray throat by gray throat. And then, impossibly, 40 years impossibly, the wolves of Briarlyn answered, green throat by green throat, until both packs were singing the one song together under one roof. And no ink in the world could ever have bought that, and everyone in the hall knew it. Eloin's hand tightened in mine. When I looked at her, there were tears on her face, and she was smiling the smile she had not quite let me see on the first hour, and now let me see whole. "You said you were cold," she said under the singing. "I was wrong," I said. "I was only waiting to hear you." There is a drawer in the Queen's chambers, our chambers now, for she never did send me back to the corridor, and in it there is a folded parchment, the ink a little blotted beside my name where a bad quill spat, sealed with the true seal of Ostmark and the true seal of Briarlyn, the thorn curving the right way. It is the treaty. It is the thing that forced us together, the bargain neither of us wanted, the peace we were each meant only to endure for the sake of packs that had run out of sons. We keep it, but we never look at it. It has become the least true thing in the room. It sits in its drawer above the fire we still talk beside in the small hours, near the worn place on the hearthstone where Vesh sleeps now, freed, ancient, gentle, having long since stopped expecting the whip. It sits a wall away from the man Tam has become, a steady young huntsman with his mother in a warm cottage and no more knives in his hands. It sits under the same roof where 2 packs, gray and green, send their children now to be raised as one, so that there is no longer a Briar side of the woods and an Ostmark side, only the woods, quiet at last. Sometimes, at the turn of the year, Eloin takes the parchment out and unfolds it and reads my blotted name beside her father's, and she smiles the whole smile, and she folds it away again. "It was such a small thing," she said to me once, doing it. "This is all they thought it would take, ink, a wedding, 2 strangers who would endure each other for the sake of the peace." She put it back in the drawer and closed it and came to me by the fire where the sentry in my chest had long since laid down its head and stayed. They were wrong about what it would take. "What did it take?" I asked her, though I knew. "You learned to listen," she said, and put her cold hand, never cold, not for years, only the memory of cold, into mine. "And I stopped being someone to endure. The parchment holds the peace on paper, but it was never the paper. It was the listening, and the woman who taught a silent wolf to hear, and the long quiet nights in the dark when we saved the thing that saved us. The ink kept 2 packs from war. She kept me. And of the 2, I will tell you as an old man now, holding her hand by the same fire, only one of them was ever the true treaty, and it was never the one in the drawer.